Hello and welcome to the first of 3 videocasts about the Vale of Glamorgan Festival. I'm Steph Power. I'm a composer and writer who's been lucky enough to have music commissioned and programmed by the festival over the years, and I'm delighted to have been asked to help introduce some of the composers who were due to feature at the festival in 2020. Of course, this is not the way that you would have expected to have encountered them this year. And of course, as we know, the festival has sadly had to be cancelled because of coronavirus restrictions. They have had to come to terms with it, as have we all. And I just hope that everybody watching this video is safe and well. To start with, I'm going to say a few words about the Vale of Glamorgan Festival itself. It takes place annually in May at venues and locations in South Wales and is one of the few festivals in the UK devoted to the music of living composers. And it has a venerable history. Founded in 1969 by Welsh composer John Metcalf, 2020 would have been its 51st year, a remarkable achievement by any measure. To say a few words about the ethos of the festival, it revolves around composers and their music. It's the repertoire that they create that takes centre stage in carefully put together concerts and events that place Welsh composers and musicians alongside their overseas counterparts within a global international context. Over the years, composers and performers have come to Wales especially for the festival from as far afield as Australia and China, Mexico and the USA, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. Visiting composers have included seminal figures like Steve Reich and Arvo Pärt, Louis Andriessen and Sofia Gubaidulina, to name just 4. The festival gives audiences a wonderful opportunity to steep themselves in international new music over several days, alongside that by British and Welsh composers who have included Graham Fitkin and Dobrinka Tabakova, Andrew Lewis and Gitto Pugh, as well as John Metcalf himself, of course. John is with me on this call, and he remains very much at the helm as artistic director of the festival. So, John, I wonder, perhaps you could say something more about the festival and the thinking behind it, its aims and values.
Well, for many years, after its inception in 1969, the festival was a very adventurous event and programmed a lot of new music, was responsible for developing music theatre in Wales, played a major part in that. And it was always an adventurous festival. In another sense, in the mid-1970s, we pioneered sponsorship in music, which was a very new thing at that time. The festival's always been really, really innovative. And although I've been with it for half a century, for a period of time, I was away in Canada at the Banff Centre. And while notionally artistic director, continuing to be in that role, I was actually a little bit more distant from the planning. So when I returned to Wales from Canada in 1990, I was invited to take up the reins again, as it were. And I agreed to do so on the basis that the festival would simply be a festival of living composers. Everybody thought it was a difficult challenge. They were right, of course, but we also were able to meet that challenge and to have many, many exciting events and festivals since then.
What would you say the aims and values are of the festival that makes it unique?
Well, a lot of festivals work on the basis of what is touring that year and have some very remarkable performances. We build the festival around a repertoire first approach. So we first of all decide which pieces, which are the core pieces, which are the seminal pieces, which pieces by which composers are really going to be the main building blocks of the festival. And once we've done that, we then build around that to feature the composers. We can often do as many as 10, 12, 20 works by a single composer in one festival, notably in the festival which we devoted almost exclusively to Peter Sculthorpe and Henryk Gorecki in 1993, for example. So we take a composer portrait approach as well as a repertoire first approach. And having done that, we then look for those performers, those wonderful performers who are completely committed to performing contemporary music. We bring the strongest advocates of those composers to perform the works. And that's really what we've done. And in so doing, we've thrown open the window of Wales to the entire world. And of course, that's had an influence on our own music making here in Wales, as we'll hear in the subsequent vidcasts of this year's festival.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I mean, it strikes me that one of the really key aspects of the festival is that, as you alluded to, we get the chance to actually really hear a composer's work in depth. So we get to hear a range of their music across different kinds of genres, different music written for different ensembles and so on, and also from different points in their composing careers. I wonder if I could just give an introduction to one of the composers who's going to be joining us later on this videocast, but he's also a figure who's celebrated internationally as well as throughout the UK, and of course here in his home nation of Wales. Featured composer this year, Huw Watkins. Many listeners in Wales will know Huw from his position from 2015 until recently as BBC National Orchestra of Wales Composer in Association, a role which has its roots as far back as the year 2000, when the orchestra commissioned his Sinfonietta. He was born in 1976 in Blackwood, and as a consummate pianist, in demand as a concerto soloist, chamber player and duet partner, as well as a composer, he follows Britten and Shostakovich in a fine tradition of what you could call public composer performers. That is, not belonging to the avant-garde or any kind of school, yet robustly individual and innovative on their own terms, with a distinctive voice capable of touching a wide range of listeners. Indeed, Britten and Shostakovich are two of Huw's prime musical precursors, along with a host of composers he first encountered listening as a young man to the orchestra in Wales and meeting figures like the sorely missed late Welsh composer Mervyn Birch, who extended his listening range from Bartók to Stravinsky, Ravel to Debussy. And it was these and other major early 20th century figures who made the greatest impact. It's notable too that Huw came of age as a composer during the final decade of Michael Tippett's life, enormously touched by his music at a time of renewed interest in tonality and the straightforward, unironic use of classical forms. At the Vale of Glamorgan Festival 2020, Huw's music and his performing expertise were due to be featured across a range of genres, from solo instrumental work to the Welsh premiere of his symphony by a string quartet and piano quintet, and more. Whatever the genre, his music reveals a fecund imagination allied with impeccable craftsmanship and a directness of expression that engages performer and listener alike. Drawing on rich practical experience and a highly attuned ear, Huw is adept at dramatic interplay on every level, from the textural to the structural, deploying the element of surprise from strongly anchored, warmly lyrical foundations. Let's hear Huw play his Invention for solo piano. So that was Invention by Huw, and I'm really delighted to say that Huw has now joined us on the video. That's a very beautiful piece, Huw. Can you tell us anything about it?
Yes, it was a lovely occasion. A good friend of mine, Rhett Griffiths, who decided for his sister's 40th birthday about 10 years ago that he wanted to give her something unusual as a present. And he commissioned a piece for her. She's a very good amateur pianist. And I thought he'd also written a poem, which I was to use as my inspiration. And so I wrote these 4 inventions, thinking of Bach a little bit, the Bach inventions, which have a kind of pedagogical intent as well. And so there's a little counterpoint. There's each piece, as you heard, that the last one is very short and simple and unplayable by, I should say, a reasonably talented amateur. So it was that kind of gift, that a sort of domestic piece that somebody can play at home and enjoy. And it was a lovely idea. It's so nice when people commission you rather than big organizations. If somebody just has a bit of spare cash and they think, well, why don't I do this? It's such a generous thing.
Yeah, lovely. Well, it's wonderful to have you join us. We're very, very sorry that it's not in person and that we've had to cancel the festival this year. I know it's been sort of tough for everybody, and I'm hoping that that you're okay. And with John here as well, I was wondering how did the two of you sort of get together? How did the framework for this year's festival sort of happen?
Well, Huw and I had various discussions, and it was a really wonderful opportunity to have Huw as a featured composer opposite John Luther Adams. Presents a whole spectrum of contemporary music, and it's of course wonderful that we've got a featured composer from Wales in the 2020 festival. When I use that in the present, I'm very much hoping that when things improve, that we will bring this festival and this plan back. We've got a whole lot of anniversaries that we're planning for 2021. So it won't be in a year's time, but we're planning for the major elements of this program to be presented at the latest by 2022. So our discussion today and the music, the lovely music we just heard, is a prelude in itself to happier, brighter times in the future when we look forward to hearing these pieces in front of an audience. And we chose Huw's music, Sparing His Blushes, because of his wonderful, wonderful musicianship and charm and wit and classical form. And he's obviously is a wonderful pianist, an exceptional pianist. He's very much a musician's musician, and that was really instrumental in our invitation to be a featured composer.
It's been such a pleasure for me because I've known about Vale of Glamorgan since since I was a boy growing up in South Wales, and one of my very, very earliest sort of professional outings as a composer was I can't even remember the year. It must have been 20 years ago with Jeremy Hugh Williams, the wonderful Welsh baritone, singing some Hardy songs that I'd written for him. I can't remember exactly where it was. It was a beautiful church somewhere that you used back then. And since then, I've come back every few years and done things, and you've generously programmed. I think the last thing was my cello concerto, done about 2 or 3 years ago.
It's done by your brother. Really,
performed indeed by my brother. Yes, exactly.
Really, really special. I've got a question for you, Huw.
Yes.
Of the pieces that we plan to present this year, what was the one that most excited you? What were you most looking for? What were you and are you most looking forward to?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, it's I would initially have said the symphony, just because that was a piece that the Halle commissioned, and you know what it's like for composers writing pieces for orchestras. It's so rare that they get done by other orchestras, and so this was going to be a piece that the Halle did and recorded even, and it would have been such a thrill to hear BBC Now perform it as well, with a different conductor and a different hall, all of that. So I know the BBC Welsh, BBC Now incredibly well, and that was a real shame. But also, having been in touch with Anne Denholm, the harpist, who's going to play my suite, and in fact even sent me a little video clip of it the other day, and that sounded absolutely stunning, and I really can't wait to hear her play that. I think she might even have recorded a bit of it for you at some point.
She's recorded all 4 pieces. And I listened to it this afternoon, in fact.
Oh, you've heard it all right. I haven't heard it yet, so that's something I'm really looking forward to. She's a splendid player.
Well, Huw, we've got a real a treat for you then, because it's Anne's recording of your suite for harp that's going to close out this video cast.
Oh wow! Oh, how about that?
That's fantastic.
That will be a treat.
The other thing that you bring to the festival here, which is really wonderful, is that we've occasionally had a thread, which is the composer plays.
Yes.
So some composers are brilliant performers and proponents of their own music, and some aren't. But it brings a special quality when the composer, you get a real insight into the music. Not necessarily the most authentic one, I think, because it's really interesting to hear what other interpreters make of composers' music. But certainly in inviting you to be part of the festival, we had it in mind that you would bring that special quality of playing your own music to the mix.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's something I've always done, really. I mean, I can't remember a time really where I just did one thing. As soon as I started learning to play the piano, I started to compose, and I think I've probably said before, one of my very first favourite composers, still a favourite composer, is Benjamin Britten, and I think for me, what I love about him is the way that not only his piano playing is so perfect for his own music, but when he's playing Mozart or Frank Bridge, his teacher, or whoever it is, Shostakovich, I suppose, it's equally brilliant, and there's a sort of insight, I think, that he gets anyway from it into his piano playing from being a composer that I think I see in a lot of composer pianists, actually, that sort of slightly different perspective, which is, and it's also for me is the reason I keep doing it, because I feel like if I just did one activity, the other one would suffer somehow.
Well, we have some wonderful video of you playing your prelude from the 4 Spencer pieces.
Oh, fantastic! Yes.
So let's have a listen to you playing that.
Fantastic.
Huw, thank you so much for that. That's a very, very beautiful prelude. You wrote the 4 Spencer pieces around, was it the turn of the millennium, is that right? It's around the time when you had your first commission with BBC National Orchestra of Wales.
That's right. I mean, it's gone very quickly. It seems like the other day. It was a commission from a music society in Maidenhead, where I played with a wonderful violinist, Alexandra Wood, and the chap who ran it was a huge fan of Stanley Spencer. I hadn't seen any of his paintings. Stanley Spencer, of course, was from Cookham, near Maidenhead, and so he said, "I'd like to commission you to write something, but it must be based on these paintings." And he drove me around to see them. These amazing chapel, First World War memorial chapel near Newbury, and I thought, actually, this is a brilliant idea. These paintings are so vivid. And his other specification was he wanted it to be a bit like pictures at an exhibition. So he, where there's a theme that goes all the way through that to suggest walking. He wanted what came out, what you just heard, the prelude and also the postlude, to suggest somehow the Thames quietly flowing through all this Spencer countryside. So that's really what I wanted to evoke with that piece that we've just heard, just the gentle flowing of water through the English countryside.
The planned festival actually had quite a feast of your chamber music, because we also had the Suite for Harp planned. And before our conversation today, I had a chance to listen to that this afternoon, and it's a typical piece. It's full of fun and wit and lovely musicianship. So it's very enjoyable. And I think you haven't heard that recording yet by Anne Denholm, so it's something to look forward to, I think.
Well, that's right. I hadn't worked with Anne at all. I mean, I'd heard what a wonderful musician she was, and until the other day, in fact, on her Instagram feed, she played a little clip of her practicing my piece, and I thought, my God, you don't need to do much more practice. It was already, stunning. So, I'm really very excited to hear her play the whole thing, and hope to hear it live one day.
We hope to indeed that you will, and because that concert was planned to contain the Yupik dances and Athabascan dances of John Luther Adams, and of course your own suite. So it was one of the places where the featured composers came together. We had a chance to hear some of the slightly smaller pieces. So we certainly hope to hear that concert again. Yes,
I hope so. Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. And well, I just want to thank both of you, John and Huw, for joining in this. The Zoom is an experience which is still slightly alarming as far as I'm concerned, but we are all getting used to it.
Well, me too. I'm a bit of a novice, but it's been absolutely lovely to see you both, and it's such a wonderful festival. I can't wait for it to come back even more excitingly in 2021 than this year. So, wish you all the best.
Thank you, Huw. Really appreciate that, and yes. And this conversation has certainly whetted my appetite for. I'm looking forward positively, and I'm sure that we're going to hear these pieces very, very soon. So, thank you so much for your contribution today.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see both.
Yes, and you. And for everybody now, we're going to hear Anne Denholm playing Huw's wonderful Suite for Harp. And that will close out this video cast. But if you'd like to hear more of Anne, she's going to be playing some more pieces for us in the next video casts to come. So watch out for those. Thanks for watching, and stay safe and well, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.